Right now, let's take this discussion further with Tebogo Khaas, and he's the chairperson of Public Interest South Africa. Mr. Khaas, thank you so much for your time. So, Mr. Mdwaba has now got legal letters, essentially, from all three ministers. In fact, the ANC Secretary-General himself, Fikile Mbalula, opening a case of crimen injuria against him. How serious should we take these charges, and what's your reaction just on the allegations?
Look, anytime anybody, and thank you, Unati, for having me, anytime anybody makes allegations such as the ones that Mr. Mdwaba has made against the three ministers and the ANC Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula, it's always a cause for concern, because we are worried about the malfeasance that we know happen in government or in public spaces. And to the extent that Mr. Mdwaba makes those allegations, they must be taken seriously. But what worries us a lot is the fact that Mr. Mdwaba chooses to raise these allegations when he himself is expected to respond to allegations of his alleged involvement at the UIF. Therefore, you ask yourself, what is the motive? And it also tends to shroud his allegations with some of the issues that have got no bearing or no bearing to the matter at hand, that is the UIF 5 billion that nearly left the coffers. He lumps in his relationship with the Minister of Labour, who had communicated Cabinet's decision to not support Mr. Mdwaba's earlier aspirations to become the DG of the International Labour Organization. Something that is far from this. And now he's bringing that is just to try and muddy the water. That's my assessment. But be that as it may, we cannot dismiss them outright. But there's a saying in law that he who alleges must prove. So Mr. Mdwaba, with his allegations, he must then approach the authority and say, this is why I'm making this type of allegations. But we already know, as you said in your report, that he says he doesn't trust the criminal justice system. So what is left is for him to now go and rubbish people's names, it looks like, in public in the manner that he has. But also, more importantly, Mr. Mdwaba missed an opportunity to ensure that a proper investigation was done in this matter, because when he was approached, as he alleges, around December or thereabout last year, he could have registered the complaint with the police. Perhaps even a sting would have been set up to make sure that those intermediaries or even the minister themselves phone are intercepted, or telephone communications are intercepted lawfully, to ensure that if there was any evidence of wrongdoing on their part, that could have been unearthed. But no, he didn't choose to do that. All that you see now is Mr. Mdwaba raising these allegations after the fact, when we know that the minister has blocked what he did after the revelations were first made in the newspapers, including the Sunday Times. So it is worrisome at the same time, but the motive here is also something that we cannot discount completely.
One of the things that he says in reports that we have seen, of course, is that he couldn't report this to the law enforcement authorities because he did not trust them. Essentially, this is something that a lot of people, if you can call them that as whistleblowers, have been saying to us over time. Now, the question also becomes worrisome, because if you look at this UIF deal, 5 billion rand, it is meant to be a tool to drive employment. Just talk to us about the implications. Had this deal gone through and had the bribe been paid, what would we be likely dealing with here?
Look, that would have been money, the workers' money, investments or insurance money gone. Because as we understand the transaction, half of that was going to be in the form of a grant. In other words, there was no expectations for the 2.5 billion to be paid back to the fiscus by Thuja Capital or any of the entities that were party to this. And then the other 2.5 billion would have its own terms in terms of repaying terms. But we know that oftentimes such money would likely not also have been repaid to the system. The implications of that is that 5 billion would have been eviscerated from the system, money that belongs to unemployed. You and I who contribute to the UIF fund, in the event that we lose our job, we hope that for the duration of 6 months or thereabout, we can access the fund. 5 billion is a lot of money, and there's a lot of things that can be done with 5 billion. Especially here, we're living in a country with high unemployment, and if you want to believe Mr. Mdwaba, he was going to come up with a scheme that will somehow miraculously create thousands and thousands of jobs, and something that hasn't been tested, which he likens to Elon Musk and Bill Gates and other business ventures. Those type of business ventures. It is hard to believe that such job employment schemes would have been realized or been as effective, or the efficacy thereof realized to the extent that it is claimed. So that if that money had left Unathi, chances are we would have been pleading with Dubai, Switzerland, and other offshore jurisdictions to try to repatriate that. And we know that's not likely, because we know what happens with the money that the Guptas took. Bushiri also allegedly took the money out of the country. Once it leaves this lender, and chances are it was going to likely. And it would have been poorer. 5 billion is a lot of money. I don't know how many RTP houses you can buy. I don't know how much budget that the police, the NPA needs, 5 billion can do. We were talking recently, we've received reports of 2 billion being spent on VIP policing, and the same amount that could have been spent or more to improve the hawks. And or even the National Prosecution Authority. 5 billion is a lot of money, Unathi. We shouldn't scoff it off.
Let's look at
and it's important for me to make this. It's important for me to make this point, Unathi. What is also discouraging, or rather, disappointing, was a comment that, to paraphrase, Mr. Mdwaba made in the third interview, TV interview, wherein he says, at least he was only going for 5 billion and not hundreds and hundreds of millions, which in itself shows the lack of shame and awareness of the egregious nature of the allegations that are leveled against him.
Now, let's talk about just some of the things that have come out, of these reports, particularly the relationship that Mr. Mdwaba had with the Labour Minister, Minister Nxesi. I mean, he himself, Minister Nxesi, saying that, he believes that Mdwaba has an axe to grind with him. He says that 2 years ago, he decided to withdraw support for his candidacy for a position in the International Labour Organization, a decision he says was taken by government. And of course, we know that previously that Mr. Mdwaba has also been found as a delinquent director. This was found in courts. Mr. Mdwaba has said that this has subsequently, been revoked, and he is not, in fact, a delinquent director. What spotlight does this shine on just the kind of people who are dealing with projects of such great magnitude, particularly projects that are meant to impact positively, to the labor force? And now we're having ministers and essentially top business people having these arguments in the public space and talking of, issues of corruption and bribery. How concerned should we be, particularly at the back of the Zondo Commission?
We should be concerned. We should be. If you are not concerned, you should now be very much concerned, because at the end of the day, it talks to the issue of character, the issue of integrity. If a court found, as it did in the case of Mr. Mdwaba, that he was declared a delinquent, that was around 2012, if I read the court papers correctly. And if that been the case, it would take 7 years from him to be rehabilitated. I do not know when you say it has been revoked or reversed or whatever it is, what that means. So does that mean that after the lapse of the 7 years imposed from 2012, that would have been 2019, for that to the rehabilitation to have taken place, whether it's the courts to upend an earlier decision? I'm not aware. Maybe whoever gave that information to, they should have asked as to what process was followed to ensure that it is being revoked, as you put it. But be that as it may, it just shows character, the kind of weaknesses in terms of the individuals that we put at the helm of public institutions, including universities, that you could have somebody with that type of adverse finding by a competent court of law sitting in council, even worse, chairing that council. So it is worrisome. We must, at the same breath, also congratulate the minister for doing his job, something that is very laughable because it's like placing a fish for swimming. But because we are not used to this type of interventions by cabinet ministers or officials, especially as it pertains to politically connected individuals. This must be lauded as an example of what should be done by political figureheads. Because had we presented Mr. Mdwaba to the ILO as a candidate that has got the blessings of our government, it would have reflected badly on South Africa for having, in the face of somebody who, with a judgment at the time, the judgment, I'm not sure if it was already lapsed or it was rehabilitated or whatever, it was challenged in court. But to the extent that there was a cloud, the government cabinet itself took a good decision that we should laud. And the minister was just communicating, was duty-bound to communicate or put to effect a decision of cabinet, not a decision of Minister Thulas Nxesi, not a decision of Comrade Thulas Nxesi, but a decision that is not a personal decision that cabinet had considered and made. And therefore, Mr. Mdwaba, if he's got issues, and I'm not here, I don't hold a brief for Minister Nxesi. He can speak for himself. They are well resourced to do that. But he shouldn't be directing his anger at Minister Nxesi, because that was not Mr. Nxesi's decision. As I understand, it is a cabinet decision. So it is a cabinet of the Republic that decided, no, Mr. Mdwaba, we cannot put South Africa behind your name.
Yeah, Mr. Khaas, thank you so much for your time. We absolutely understand your point, and it has been made. Thank you so much for your time.